She was lost in the forest. But the real danger came from men, not beasts. Stay with me, because this is the story of a young woman who was surrounded by bandits until a forester stepped out of the shadows, and nothing was ever the same. I walked along the narrow path, desperate to find the road before darkness swallowed the woods. The forest was quiet, too quiet, and when the crunch of footsteps broke that silence, my heart leapt into my throat. 3 men emerged from between the trees, their grins sharp, their eyes cruel. "Where are you going in such a hurry, pretty?" one of them sneered, blocking the path ahead. I turned quickly, but another shadow moved behind me. The circle closed in, their laughter echoing through the stillness of the forest. My breath came shallow, my body frozen as I realized no one could hear me here. Then, from the darkness, a voice rang out, low, steady, and commanding. "Step away from her. Now." A tall man stepped into the dim light, his figure strong, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. The hunting knife at his belt gleamed faintly, but it was his eyes, calm yet burning with quiet fury, that made the bandits falter. The forester stood between me and them, unshakable, as though the entire forest itself had risen in my defense. The bandits exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier smirks fading as the forester's presence settled over the clearing like a heavy weight. One of them spat to the side, trying to mask his hesitation with bravado. "You think you can scare us, old man," he taunted, stepping forward. The forester didn't flinch. He shifted his stance slightly, the handle of his knife catching the faint moonlight. His voice was calm, deliberate, each word landing like a warning bell. "Try me. But you won't get a second chance." Something in his tone silenced the mocking laughter. The air grew colder, stiller, as if even the forest was watching. I clutched my hands to my chest, fear still clawing at me, but a flicker of hope sparked, because he didn't move an inch. The leader of the bandits growled under his breath, but his eyes betrayed doubt. The man before them wasn't afraid. He wasn't just 1 against 3, he was something more, rooted to the earth itself, immovable. And for the first time that night, it wasn't me who was trapped. It was them. The leader's jaw tightened, and he pulled a rusted blade from his belt, waving it carelessly as if to regain control. But the forester only took a slow step forward, his boots crunching against the leaves, his shoulders broad and unyielding. "You don't belong here," he said evenly, his gaze locked on them. "This is my forest. And she's under my protection now." The words struck harder than any weapon. The other 2 men shifted uneasily, their bravado cracking as the silence deepened. The forester's hand hovered near his knife, not raised yet, but the certainty in his posture made it clear, if they moved, he would not hesitate. I stood frozen behind him, my breath shallow, but I could feel the calm that radiated from him, steady and unshakable. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't afraid. He was the immovable wall between me and the danger that had closed in. The bandits hesitated, their smirks gone, and in that pause I realized something. The balance of fear had shifted. They weren't the hunters anymore. He was. The man with the blade tightened his grip, but the tremor in his wrist betrayed him. The forester didn't need to raise his voice, his calm, steady tone cut sharper than any threat. "Drop it," he said. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The forest held its breath. Then one of the younger bandits stepped back, muttering under his breath, his bravado collapsing. The second followed, his eyes darting between the trees as though the shadows themselves had turned against him. The leader lingered, anger flickering in his eyes, but the weight of the forester's stare pressed on him until finally he cursed, shoved the knife back into his belt, and retreated into the darkness. Silence fell again, heavy and absolute. Only the whisper of wind through the branches remained. The forester let his hand fall from his knife and turned slowly toward me. His face, still stern from the confrontation, softened the moment his eyes met mine. "You're safe now," he said quietly. And though my legs trembled, though my heart raced, I believed him. For the first time that night, I could breathe again. I swayed on my feet, the fear draining from me all at once, leaving me weak. The forester caught it instantly, his hand reached out, steady and warm, resting against my arm to keep me upright. "Easy," he murmured, his voice low, almost gentle now. "They won't be back." I lifted my eyes to him, searching his face. The sternness he'd carried just moments ago had melted into something quieter, but no less powerful. He studied me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken for a different reason, as if he wasn't just checking if I was unharmed, but claiming responsibility for me in some unspoken way. I didn't know what to do, I whispered, my voice breaking. "You did the only thing you could," he replied firmly, his thumb brushing against my arm in a subtle gesture of reassurance. "You survived. That's enough." The weight of his words wrapped around me, grounding me more than the touch of his hand. The forest was still dark, still vast, but with him beside me, it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a shield. His hand lingered at my arm a moment longer, steady and reassuring, before sliding down to take my hand fully. His grip was firm, not demanding, but grounding, as if to say without words that I wasn't alone anymore. "Come," he said softly, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who belonged to the forest itself. "I'll take you out of here." We walked slowly through the trees, the crunch of leaves beneath our steps the only sound. The forest that had moments ago felt suffocating now seemed calmer, safer, as though it bowed to his presence. Every time a shadow shifted, my heart leapt, but the pressure of his hand in mine pulled me back to steady ground. I glanced at him in the dim light, his sharp features outlined by the pale glow of the moon breaking through the canopy. Strong, unshaken, his eyes were still scanning the darkness, always alert. Yet when they flicked down to meet mine, they softened instantly, and in that look was something that made warmth bloom in my chest. The danger was gone, but the memory of his voice, his stance, the way he had stood between me and fear, it stayed, pulsing in me stronger than my own heartbeat. We moved deeper along the trail, his stride purposeful, mine shaky but steadier with every step I took beside him. His hand never left mine, his grip constant, like an anchor pulling me out of the night's terror. At one point I stumbled over a root hidden beneath the leaves, and before I could fall his arm circled around my waist, holding me firmly against him. My breath caught as I felt the solid strength of his body so close, his warmth pressing through the cool forest air. "You're safe," he whispered again, his lips so near to my ear that the words seemed to settle into me rather than just be heard. I looked up at him then, truly looked. The moonlight carved shadows along his face, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the trees with vigilance. Yet when his gaze finally returned to mine, something shifted, the hardness gave way to an intensity that wasn't born of duty, but of something far more personal. I couldn't speak. My lips parted, but no words came. The forest was silent, but between us there was a pull stronger than fear, stronger than reason, and I realized the moment he saved me wasn't just about protection. It was the beginning of something I couldn't walk away from. His arm remained around my waist a heartbeat longer than necessary, and though he could have released me, he didn't. Instead, his hand lingered at my side, warm and steady, keeping me close as we moved forward together. My pulse raced, not from the fear of what had happened, but from the nearness of him, the way his presence seemed to fill the entire forest. When the trail widened and the moonlight spilled down through the branches, he finally slowed, turning me gently to face him. His hands slid from my waist but didn't let go completely, fingertips brushing against my hip as though he couldn't bear to break the connection. "Look at me," he said quietly. I raised my eyes, and in his gaze I found no trace of the danger we'd just escaped, only fire, fierce and unshakable, but tempered now with something softer. My breath caught, and I felt the trembling start all over again, though for a reason far different than fear. His thumb brushed across the back of my hand, slow and deliberate, as he whispered, "You're not alone anymore. Not while I'm here." And in the silence that followed, surrounded by shadows and moonlight, I knew I believed him. Completely. The silence between us thickened, not with fear but with something heavier, something that pulled me closer to him without a word being spoken. His hand lifted slowly, brushing a stray lock of hair from my face, the roughness of his fingers sending a shiver through me. I didn't move away. I couldn't. My breath quickened as his touch lingered at my cheek, his thumb tracing lightly across my skin, steady yet unbearably gentle. "You've been through enough tonight," he murmured, his voice low and rough, carrying both command and tenderness. "But I swear, no one will ever lay a hand on you again." My chest tightened at the promise, my lips parting with a trembling inhale. The forest seemed to vanish around us, replaced by the warmth of his body, the certainty in his words. He stepped closer, erasing the last of the distance, and the air between us burned with an intensity one couldn't fight. When his forehead brushed against mine, my eyes fluttered shut on instinct. His breath mingled with mine, warm, uneven, and for a fleeting moment, the entire world was reduced to this, his strength holding me steady, his nearness unraveling every fear I had left. His breath fanned across my lips, shallow and uneven, and though he hadn't kissed me yet, my whole body trembled as if he already had. His hand slid from my cheek to the back of my neck, steady and firm, holding me there as though the forest itself might try to pull me away. I opened my eyes for a moment, just long enough to meet his gaze. It was fierce, unblinking, but behind that fire there was something else, something raw, something I felt mirrored in myself. Neither of us said a word, words would have broken the fragile, electric silence. Then his lips brushed mine. Not a demand, not a claim, just the faintest touch, like a spark searching for flame. My breath hitched, and I leaned into it without thinking, surrendering to the inevitability of the moment. The kiss deepened, slow and deliberate, his hand at my neck anchoring me in place while the world around us faded. The night, the bandits, the shadows, all of it was gone. There was only the strength of his arms, the warmth of his mouth, and the unshakable certainty that I had been saved not just from danger, but from loneliness itself. His kiss grew steadier, stronger, and every second it lasted I felt myself sinking deeper into him, as though the forest, the night, even the ground beneath my feet had disappeared. His other hand slid back to my waist, pulling me against him with a quiet certainty that made my heart pound harder than fear ever had. I clung to his shoulders, fingers tightening in the fabric of his jacket, needing to feel that he was real, that he wasn't going to vanish like a dream when the dawn came. His lips moved against mine with a mixture of restraint and hunger, a balance between control and the fire that neither of us could hide anymore. When he finally pulled back, just enough to let us breathe, his forehead stayed pressed to mine. His voice was low, husky, carrying the weight of everything he hadn't said until now. "You don't have to be afraid anymore, not when you're with me." The way he said it wasn't just comfort, it was a vow. And as I looked into his eyes, still burning even in the pale moonlight, I knew he meant every word. My fear was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous, far more consuming, the certainty that I belonged in his arms. His arms tightened around me, not with urgency but with a fierce tenderness that made me melt completely into his hold. The steady rise and fall of his chest pressed against mine, grounding me, and for the first time that night I felt not fragile, but protected, as if nothing could touch me while he was there. He tilted my chin up gently with his fingers, his gaze locking onto mine. The fire in his eyes hadn't dimmed, but it was softer now, wrapped in warmth I hadn't expected from a man who only moments ago had faced down shadows without flinching. "You're safe," he whispered again, the words brushing against my lips like another kiss. "As long as I'm here, nothing will harm you." I felt tears sting my eyes, not from fear but from the overwhelming rush of relief, of gratitude, of something deeper that had taken root in the space between us. My hands slid down to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my palms. And in that rhythm, strong and unyielding, I realized he hadn't just saved me from the bandits. He had saved me from the loneliness that had haunted me far longer. His hand moved slowly up my back, steady and reassuring, as if he wanted to erase every trace of fear that still lingered inside me. His touch was warm, protective, and the longer he held me, the quieter the world around became. The forest no longer felt cold or threatening, it felt like it belonged to him, and because of that, I belonged here too. I rested my cheek against his chest, listening to the strong, even thud of his heartbeat. Each beat was like a promise, firm and unshakable, and it lulled me into a calm I hadn't thought possible after what had happened. He lowered his head slightly, his breath brushing against my hair. "You don't have to face anything alone anymore," he murmured, the words quiet but heavy with meaning. I closed my eyes, letting those words sink into me, and tightened my grip on him just a little, not out of fear this time, but out of a need I could no longer deny. His arms adjusted around me instantly, as though he'd been waiting for me to lean into him fully. And there, wrapped in his strength beneath the silver glow of the moon, I knew my life had just shifted forever. He drew back just enough to look at me, his hand still resting firmly at my waist, his thumb tracing small circles as if to remind me I wasn't going anywhere. His eyes caught the faint moonlight, steady and unyielding, but softened when they met mine. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't empty, it was full of everything we'd both felt but hadn't dared to admit. His gaze dropped briefly to my lips before lifting back to my eyes, and I felt my breath catch, my heart racing in my chest. "You're stronger than you think," he said finally, his voice low, almost a growl, but tender at the edges. "But from now on, you don't have to be strong alone." Those words unraveled something inside me. My fingers tightened against his chest, my body leaning closer, drawn by a force as undeniable as gravity. He felt it too, his hand at my waist pulled me nearer, and before I could take another breath, his lips were on mine again, this time deeper, slower, as though he was claiming not just the moment, but the part of me I'd never given to anyone. And as I melted into the kiss, into the heat and safety of his embrace, I understood, this wasn't just rescue. This was the beginning of something I could never walk away from. His kiss lingered, slow and consuming, and the more I gave in, the stronger his hold became. One hand stayed firm at my waist, the other slid higher, resting against the curve of my back, keeping me pressed to him as though he feared I might slip away if he let go. The forest around us seemed to fade into silence, every shadow retreating, every sound swallowed by the intensity of the moment. His lips moved against mine with a mix of control and raw need, a balance that left me trembling in his arms. When he finally drew back, just slightly, his breath was uneven, brushing against my face in warm waves. His forehead rested against mine, and in the dim silver glow of the moon I saw the truth in his eyes. This was no fleeting moment. "You're mine now," he whispered, his voice hoarse but steady, as if the words were carved into stone. The certainty in his tone sent a shiver through me, not of fear, but of surrender. My hands, still pressed to his chest, tightened, silently telling him what I couldn't yet say aloud. He was right. I was his. His words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, and before I could even form a thought, his lips found mine again, rougher this time, hungrier, as though sealing the vow he had just spoken. My body yielded instantly, melting into his strength, while my fingers fisted into the fabric of his shirt, anchoring myself to him. His arm around my waist pulled me flush against him, leaving no space between us, his warmth flooding through me and burning away the last traces of fear. The forest, the night, the danger, all of it disappeared beneath the weight of his embrace. When he finally broke the kiss, his mouth trailed lower, brushing against my cheek, my jaw, until his breath was hot against my ear. His voice came rough, uneven, but filled with certainty. No one will touch you again. No one will take you from me. The promise sank deep, more powerful than anything I had ever heard. I closed my eyes, trembling not from terror but from the overwhelming rush of his presence, his claim, his vow. And in that moment, held tightly in his arms, I knew I didn't want to escape, I wanted to belong. His grip didn't loosen, if anything it grew stronger, holding me as if the whole world could try to tear me away and he still wouldn't let it happen. His breath was ragged, his lips brushing against my skin as he spoke again, quieter this time but with even more weight. You're mine, and I'll protect you with everything I am. The words struck through me like fire, igniting something that spread from my chest to every part of me. My hands slid higher along his chest, over his shoulders, clinging to him with the same desperation I heard in his voice. He pulled me closer, his forehead pressed to mine, his eyes dark and burning. For a moment he just held me there, suspended in that fragile, dangerous silence where nothing else existed. Then he kissed me again, slower now, deeper, a kiss that wasn't just a claim but a promise, binding and unshakable. The forest was silent, the night still, but inside me everything roared with the certainty of one truth: I no longer feared him, no longer feared the darkness. Because I had been saved, and now I belonged to him. His mouth lingered on mine, unhurried, as though he wanted me to feel every heartbeat, every breath he poured into that kiss. His hand slid up my back, spreading warmth through me, steady and unyielding, while the other remained firm at my waist, anchoring me completely in his hold. When he finally drew back, just far enough for me to catch my breath, his eyes searched mine, burning with something fierce and unspoken. The forest seemed to lean in with us, the night air thick and still, as though the world itself was waiting for what came next. You belong to me now, he murmured, his voice low, rough with emotion, and nothing will ever change that. The words settled deep inside me, leaving no space for doubt. My chest rose and fell quickly, my body trembling, but it wasn't from fear. My hands gripped his shoulders tighter, silently answering what I couldn't bring myself to say aloud. He saw it, he knew. His lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile, not of victory, but of certainty. Then he pulled me against him once more, holding me as if I was already a part of him, as though I had been his all along. His embrace tightened, and this time there was no hesitation, no restraint, only the raw force of a man who had already made his choice. His warmth wrapped around me completely, his chest rising and falling against mine, his heart beating steady and hard like a drum I could feel through my whole body. He lowered his head again, his lips brushing along my temple, trailing slowly down to my cheek, each touch deliberate, possessive. My breath caught, my fingers curling deeper into his shoulders, holding on to him as though I might lose myself if I let go. I found you in the dark, he whispered against my skin, his voice deep, ragged, and I'll never let the dark take you again. Those words sealed everything. They weren't just comfort, they were a vow, a claim, a promise I knew he would keep no matter what. I closed my eyes and leaned into him fully, surrendering to the fire and strength that held me. The forest was silent, but inside his arms it felt as if the whole world had shifted, as if nothing outside us mattered anymore. And in that moment, trembling but safe, I knew the truth. I was his, completely. His lips pressed to mine once more, slower this time but deeper, a kiss that felt less like fire and more like inevitability. His hand at my waist slid to the small of my back, pulling me flush against him until I could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat hammering into me. I melted into his hold, my palms resting flat against his chest, feeling the rough fabric beneath my fingertips and the solid strength of the man beneath it. His kiss grew more insistent, as though he wanted to brand me with the certainty he had already spoken aloud, that I was his, and there was no turning back. When he broke away, just barely, his forehead pressed hard to mine, his breath mingling with mine in sharp, uneven bursts. His eyes burned in the pale light, dark and fierce, and his words came out hoarse, almost broken. "You don't belong to the night, you belong to me." The forest was still around us, the danger long gone, yet the intensity in his voice carried more weight than any threat I had faced. My body trembled against him, not from fear, but from surrender. And as his arms closed around me again, strong and unyielding, I knew I would never fight that truth, because I didn't want to. His hold became absolute, both arms wrapping around me as though he was sealing the vow with his body. I felt the heat of him against every part of me, steady and overwhelming, a force I could no longer resist even if I tried. His breath was ragged at my ear, each exhale brushing fire across my skin. He kissed the side of my face, slow and deliberate, his lips tracing a path that made my knees weaken beneath me. My fingers gripped at his shoulders, clinging, not out of fear but out of need, the kind of desperate need that grew with every second in his arms. "I'll never let you go," he whispered again, harsher now, almost a growl, as though repeating it could bind me tighter. His hand at the small of my back pressed firmly, keeping me flush against him, leaving no space between us, no escape, and I didn't want one. The forest faded entirely, swallowed by the heat that surged between us. All I could feel was him, his strength, his fire, his claim. My heart thundered as I finally understood, the night hadn't just given me fear. It had given me him. And now, I belonged nowhere else but here, in his arms. His mouth found mine one last time, fierce and unyielding, a kiss that carried every promise he had made in the shadows of the forest. His arms locked around me, strong and protective, and in that embrace I felt not just safety, but a belonging deeper than anything I had ever known. When he finally drew back, his lips lingered near mine, his forehead pressed hard against me as his voice came low, steady, unshakable. "You're mine now. Always." The forest stood silent, the danger long gone, but inside his arms the world felt changed forever. My fear had vanished, replaced by the fire of his vow, the certainty of his strength. And as I clung to him, trembling but certain, I knew the truth. I had not just been saved. I had been claimed.